Okay, my friends, today it is hot, and I mean very hot. Okay, the actual temperature is 91 and rising, but it feels like 107 with the humidity, and it's only supposed to get 8 degrees even hotter. So it's going to be 100 today with a heat index of 110. It's going to be 100 tomorrow, and there's like no end in sight. It's going to be high 90s for all this the next 10 days, okay? So in this video, I'm going to explain to you one of the #1 issues that people come into and that I see when extreme heat comes, and then I will show you what you can do about it. So first, like always, we must look to nature. In nature, plants grow next to other plants. So certain trees or plants or whatever, the roots go into the ground, they mine out nutrients and minerals, they store them in their leaves, and they do their life cycle. After that, they fall to the ground. Either the whole plants fall to the ground or the leaves of the trees fall to the ground, whatever it is, it all falls back to the earth to then become life again, okay? And in doing this, each successive layer, and each time it does this, it is creating a zone for the roots that is nice and fluffy and cool and moist. And from that, then the plant grows. So the plant can take, most plants, even classic cold-loving plants like cabbages and stuff, they can take a lot of heat if it's air temperature. But once the roots start getting hot, then things change. Then the plant quickly looks ill. And people are like, well, what's wrong with the plant? You know, is it nutrients? So they'll dump on more nutrients or something. But that's not what it is. It's oftentimes a hot root zone, because in nature they would never experience that. They would never be out in a tiny little container in the blazing hot sun just getting their roots cooked, okay? So, and they would never be like, you see some people in a nice, they make a real nice clean raised bed with lumber, and then they mow real nice around it and stuff, so there's no coverage or anything. Again, it's just cooking the roots. And they just have a raised bed that is in the blazing sun. And these issues, a hot root zone will manifest itself in so many different ways that you won't be able to tell exactly what the issue is. The plant's just not thriving. But I see it all the time, and I've seen it over the years. People don't pay enough attention to shading out their root zone and keeping it nice and cool the way nature intended. So I'm going to take you outside and I'm going to show you exactly how I mimic nature and how you too can do it and why it's so important. Okay, here we have my ice bathing trough in the wintertime, but in the summertime I convert it into the sweet potato bed. So about 4 weeks ago I planted the sweet potato slips into soil and compost, which is what they grew for a number of weeks until about 5 days ago I put all this leaf mold or the shredded leaves on top of the soil. So you don't plant into the mulch. You put the mulch on after you have planted, after they become established, and after things warm up a bit. Now you can see that I went through and put 2 to 4 inches of mulch around each one of these plants, which will keep their roots nice and cool. Here we have the tomato trellis, which they're getting pretty big. You no doubt have seen my video about this tomato trellis, how to make it. If not, I suggest you go and watch it. But you see here, I planted the tomatoes and the basil and some of the sacrificial garlic in here as well for pest deterrents. Let everything grow up for a couple of weeks, and then just about a week ago, I put 2 to 4 inches of mulch on top of the soil. And this is going to keep the roots nice and cool. And, wild animal. Vicious wild animal. You see here, I plant onions 3 to a bunch and then mulch heavily around them, and they will push each other apart as they swell up. Okay, now here is a plot of black turtle beans meant for drying. These are bush beans, and I used a cover crop on this plot, and I'll show you what I mean. About 5 weeks ago, I mowed down the winter rye that had been growing all winter long. It was about 2 feet tall by this point, and the winter rye, all winter long, was capturing sunlight and mining nutrients from deep in the soil and storing it in its plant tissue. So I mowed it all down real fine and left it on top of the soil because it's super rich in all kinds of minerals that the plants need. I then planted the beans and then put 2 to 4 inches of leaves, shredded leaves on top of that. And you can see here already in just 5 weeks, everything is totally decomposed. And that winter rye shredding has nourished the community of microorganisms that are thriving in the soil, and the earthworms and the cat. You will see in this video I use primarily leaves for my mulch. I collect them in the fall, keep them in a big pile over the winter, and then use them as mulch throughout the spring and summer. I find leaves are the best because it's what nature intended, and the earthworms love them. You will see loads of earthworms underneath fallen leaves. And they keep the weeds away very good because the way that they mat down. So leaves are the best. If you can't get leaves, then grass clippings also work fantastically. Just try to make sure the grass hasn't gone to seed yet. Otherwise, you'll be putting a lot of grass seed and weed seeds into your garden. That's also true with hay and straw, really, but both of those can introduce a lot of weeds. Now, the landscaping fabric is a great option because there's 0 weeds and it's a good air and water exchange if you want to go that route. And you can use that stuff about 3 or 4 seasons. Or even more if you're careful with it and you roll it up and bring it inside over the wintertime. But also cardboard. You can just use cardboard. And if you just have a raised bed or a pot or whatever it is, you can use newspaper, layers of newspaper or cardboard, whatever it is. The point is to protect the soil from direct exposure to the sun, from the ultraviolet and the drying effect of the wind and all of that. That all dries out the soil. The soil loves to be covered, so it's nice and moist and rich in microbial activity. Okay, here we are 5 weeks ago, and I want to show you a different kind of mulch. This is the woven landscaping fabric, the heavy-duty stuff, and I'll put a link in the description if you want to get this exact stuff. But essentially, you see here we are 5 weeks later, today. You just burn a hole in the fabric with the torch so that the hole doesn't fray because it's woven, and then you place the collard green or whatever plant into the hole. And that is going to keep the weed pressure to 0, which is awesome. And it's woven, so it's going to allow water to penetrate as it needs to be. But you see, these plants have grown big enough to shade out their own root zone at this point. And I've gotten loads of greens already, many, many pots of greens from these. And they just keep growing because they are thriving, because they have everything that they need and a cool root zone. And you can see here the corn, I did the same way. So I planted the corn, which I still need to thin it a little bit. But I planted the corn, and once it was a couple of inches tall, then I added the mulch in between the rows because the mulch is going to suppress the weeds, and that is what you need. And like I said, it's going to nourish the community of microorganisms and the earthworms, which we dramatically want. You can see here I did the beans the same way. The beans, these are pole beans. This is the pole bean privacy fence video I made. And they are the same way. Once they sprout, 2 to 4 inches of mulch. Here you will see the potato bag method. I made the video about how to grow the potatoes in the black bags. And you can see here, 4 weeks later, which is not a lot of time, they have already grown big enough to shade themselves out. And this is what I want to show to everyone, that when they say, oh, everything will roast in those bags. Well, it doesn't actually, because you have to do it in such a way that it shades itself out. You see, even though it's 100 degrees up top, down here, it's like air conditioning. It's nice and cool. Everything stays moist. And this is what you're after. You see, I have mulch here on the peas. I have some of the landscaping fabric mulch. And then the plants shade themselves out. So it's just nice and cool. And this is what you want. So there you go, my friends. Keep it covered. And that's going to help dramatically bolster the health of your plants by regulating the water, the moisture in the soil. It doesn't get super dry and then super wet. It keeps it nice and even, all right? This is gonna solve a lot of your issues if you just use heavy mulch, okay? So, if you feel like you gained something from this video, my friends, give it a thumbs up. Also, I just started a PayPal link that I put in the description if you would like to say thank you by way of a small financial contribution. That would be great. I would appreciate that. You can just go to the link and then type in, hey Nate, thanks for sharing the knowledge. I appreciate your efforts in making the videos. Here's $5. I would appreciate that. Okay, my friends, let me know if you have any questions.